Greetings, agents of MI6. I am Zazibar, and this is going to be a non-spoiler review of the 22 James Bond film, Skyfall 007. Yes, indeed. I haven't really made it that well known on my channel, but I'm a pretty big James Bond fan. I'm not like diehard, like I haven't read the books, but in terms of the films, I'm a big fan of James Bond. I love the character, I love the actors who portrayed him. I just love the style of James Bond. I'm a James Bond fan. Again, mostly of the films I've read the short stories book For Your Eyes Only and loved it, and I want to get my hands on Fleming's novels, but I just haven't had the time to sit down and read them, but I do definitely intend to do that. But in terms of the films, I'm a big fan of James Bond. And I was pumped for Skyfall. I was very excited. We haven't had a Bond film since 2008, which Quantum of Solace was the first Bond film I ever saw in theaters, and despite not being that great of a Bond film, I mean, I don't have the profound hatred for it that some people seem to have, but I mean, I liked it, but it wasn't a good, this is the first Bond movie I saw in theaters, so it was disappointing in that regard. Skyfall was not. I was even more pumped for Skyfall than I was for Quantum of Solace, just because the premise was more interesting to me. Quantum of Solace was a sequel to Casino Royale, and it didn't have the same level of excitement that both Casino Royale had and that Skyfall have. And with that being said, let's go more into Skyfall directly. Skyfall is one of the most exciting and intriguing Bond films I have ever seen. And that's really the key thing you need in a James Bond movie, is the intrigue, the excitement, the style, the acting is a big part of it, and the writing. The way you write James Bond is crucial to whether or not, me personally, if I like the movie. And this movie nailed basically every category. It was definitely a stylish Bond film, just like films like From Russia with Love, The Living Daylights, all these Bond films that had that style. It was so exciting. I was just on my seat waiting to get to the next plot point, next character reveal, next action sequence. I was just pumped up throughout this entire movie. And unlike some movies, a lot of movies, big summer blockbusters mainly, you have a lot of expectations for it, the trailers, the memorabilia, all that stuff building up to the movie. Very rarely does it actually succeed in fulfilling the pump you had for it. Skyfall was a rare exception. Every expectation I had, every level of pumped up excitement I had was met with Skyfall and exceeded. I was just wowed by the film. It is a fantastic James Bond movie. Javier Bardem is an amazing Bond villain, both in character and in performance. He's got the over-the-top, like, craziness of some of the best Bond villains, like, say, maybe as a good example, we'll point to Kananga from Live and Let Die, maybe? Nah. I don't know. He had that kind of over-the-top energy of an over-the-top Bond villain. Sorry, I can't think of one right off the top of my head. So yeah, he had that energy. But his character also had these dark undertones, these dark, interesting pockets underneath the craziness. The stuff that you want in a good villain is the over-the-top craziness. That's why a lot of people love the Joker. That's one of the main things people would like in a villain. Especially me in particular. And he also had the interesting pockets of backstory, the interesting pockets of character development. All of that was done beautifully. He is one of the best Bond villains I've seen in a long time. He would fit in perfectly with a list containing Blofeld, Dr. No, Goldfinger. He would fit in perfectly there. And his character name is Silva, which isn't actually his real name, but ooh. That's not really a spoiler. It's not like I told you his real name. Again, I want to keep this non-spoiler, so that's not really a spoiler. Just overall, he's a fantastic Bond villain. Daniel Craig, I think this is my favorite Bond performance from him, because he's actually he's played Bond a lot now, both on film and video games and just different stuff. So he's definitely grown on the masses as James Bond. And I think Casino Royale is good competition for his best Bond performance. if this isn't a close second, it might be a tie, because he is amazing in this film, and he's playing a different, not a different character. He's still that particular version of James Bond, but he's playing that James Bond from a different angle. That Bond was the young, kind of getting his stuff together James Bond, early 007. This isn't like before he retires 007, but this is later 007. This is experienced 007, and he plays that great. He just does fantastic in this film. I think this is my favorite Bond performance from him. I'm not sure. It's either this or Casino Royale, but he was fantastic in this. Judi Dench this is easily my favorite film with Judi Dench as M in it. My favorite performance by her as M. And she was just fantastic. Unlike the other two films, where I felt like her character was almost too mysterious, I suppose that's the point of M. It's not like the original M portrayed by Bernard Lee was very developed, but I like Judi Dench's M better when she has, failure behind her. She has character regrets, and she's so much more interesting in that regard, and so much more interesting to watch, and interesting to see her interact with Bond, knowing that she has this background and she's made these mistakes, because Bond's made mistakes too, and it makes them seem closer as superior. And 00. But in this film, there's almost like a father and mother and son relationship between the two, especially with the ending. And just overall, wonderfully done with her character. She's always played M great, but this was hands down her best performance. She just had more to work with the character. She's always just been kind of a really uptight, as Bond puts her in the movie, bitch. And this time that has merit. Not that it didn't have merit previously, but this time it has background, and it's so much more interesting with that. Just all in all, Skyfall is a great, great Bond movie. I have two complaints with it, though. One, the gun barrel sequence. The gun barrel sequence is those circles moving across the screen with the with Bond walking out and shooting the camera. That's the gun barrel sequence. You see it in nearly every James Bond movie. Casino Royale had a different spin on it, and Quantum of Solace had it at the end. Skyfall has it in the wrong place. Quantum of Solace had its gun barrel at the end for kind of decent reason of Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace are turning Bond into what we know of Bond. And it was kind of fitting to have the gun barrel be at the end, because it was like, now it's the Bond you know. And I expected Skyfall to be, you have the Bond you know, here's your, not typical James Bond movie, but here's the Bond you've been waiting to see from Daniel Craig. And, the usual experienced, hardened spy Bond. And I expected and was excited to see a gun barrel sequence at the beginning, a traditional gun barrel sequence. It's at the end again. I'm sorry if it's a spoiler, it's not really, it's the gun barrel sequence, it's in every Bond film, so you can expect it at some point. And I wanted it at the beginning because I thought that this would have more cemented itself as, I thought it would have worked better as, I just wanted it to be at the beginning, because I was just excited to see a gun barrel sequence at the beginning again, because we haven't had one since Die Another Day. And I think we're going to get one with the next movie, because this film, again, it's kind of turning James Bond into what we know of him from the original Connery films and the films following it. So it kind of works in Skyfall as well, and I like this particular gun barrel better than the one in Quantum of Solace, because the one in Quantum of Solace is way too quick. It's just like da-da-da-da, psh, done. Skyfall is just the more like smooth kind of, James Bond kind of gun barrel. And I liked it in that regard, didn't like that it was at the end again. And that's not a spoiler, because when Quantum of Solace came out, they revealed that gun barrel was going to be at the end too, so it's not a spoiler, it's just, I wish it was at the beginning. My second complaint is that there's a couple elements of the plot, just a couple sort of tiny ones, that don't really, they feel a little unnecessary, but more than that, they're not entirely brought through the film. And the one thing that this movie does well is that it does that the most of the time, that everything that's set up has a payoff. Except for a couple of tiny things, I don't want to spoil them because they're spoilers. and I wish they had been followed through, especially since they were like really advertised. I think you guys can guess what I mean with that. And they're not quite carried through enough. They're carried through, just not really enough to the extent you would hope for. And that's my big criticism. The gun barrel thing is just kind of, I'm a James Bond fan and I wanted it at the beginning. This particular criticism is more of just a movie thing. It doesn't feel quite carried through enough with a couple of plot points. Again, the majority of it is fine. There's a couple of things that fall a little short. But overall, Skyfall is awesome. And it's a great James Bond film, a great masterpiece of entertainment. It's just overall a fantastic Bond film, a fantastic movie. The action, I didn't talk about the action, I'll just talk about it briefly. Action is some of the best Bond stuff you've ever seen. It's amazing, especially the stuff towards the end is just awesome. The opening chase scene is really cool too. My only problem with that one is that, again, this isn't a spoiler, it's in the trailer. My only problem with the opening chase scene is that it feels a little bit too similar to the one that was at the beginning of Casino Royale. And also, here's an interesting thing. All three Daniel Craig Bond films open with a chase scene. I find that interesting, and I hope they break that trend with the next one. The opening scene is cool. It's just a little bit too similar to the one at the beginning of Casino Royale. It's still a great action scene, just it's a little bit too similar to, really feel identifiable. Overall, though, the action is awesome. Just the way it's shot is great. I feel like Quantum of Solace was a little choppy in its editing, and this film is not at all. This film was perfectly edited, perfectly shot. The action is glorious, and thank God it's not in 3D. So that's basically my review of Skyfall. Again, I absolutely loved it. I highly recommend it. If you're a Bond fan, you should have seen this movie already, but if you haven't, go out and now, while you're watching this, go out and see it now. You will not be disappointed. And if you're a moviegoer looking to get into James Bond, as a jumping on film, it's okay, but it's a little bit too, this is going to sound weird, but it's a little bit too Bond to be a jumping on film. If you want a good jumping on James Bond film, watch Casino Royale, and then watch this. And if you want to see that story continue, watch Quantum of Solace, because I like Quantum of Solace, it's just not the greatest thing ever. And then watch Skyfall, because it is glorious. So if you're into James Bond, go watch it now. If you're into action movies and spy films and you think that you can just kind of go into this and, kind of know what's going on, then go for it. You'll love it. It's a great piece of entertainment. But again, I think Bond fans and action fans and just moviegoers everywhere will be pleased with Skyfall. And I am giving Skyfall a 4.5 out of 5. I just absolutely loved it. Go see it. It's great. Skyfall was amazing. Thank you very much for watching this review of Skyfall. And I think I'm going to be doing a couple of James Bond videos over the next couple of days because now I'm just in the Bond mood. I'm thinking of doing my top 5 favorite Bond films, maybe like my order of favorite James Bond to least favorite James Bond. And I know Adam Noyce was considering, and he wants to do a chat about James Bond because him and Gorzov are all James Bond fans, and he wants to do a chat about it. So I think we're going to be doing that as well. Not sure when, so just look out for that one as well. But I do intend to do a couple of Bond videos over the next couple days while Skyfall is still fresh in the public consciousness. So thank you very much for watching this review of Skyfall. Again, I give it a 4.5 out of 5, and thank you very much for watching. I'm Zazubar, and peace out.